welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name's Lee Drinkwater, and I'm going to be doing the first part of this presentation on Microsoft Teams and the best devices that can assist your collaboration needs. I'll be doing the first 15 to 20 minutes on the Microsoft interface, the Teams interface, and some tips and tricks around getting the most out of the interface from a collaboration point of view. I'll then hand over to Tom from Microsoft, who's going to give us a review of Teams and their Microsoft Surface devices. Again, he'll talk about for 15 to 20 minutes, and then hand over to Mark from Lenovo to talk about Teams and the ThinkSmart View to present the benefits of that with Microsoft Teams. So my aim, as I said, is to give you a brief overview of the purpose of Microsoft Teams, some key features, and a brief walkthrough of the interface before handing over to Tom. So my presentation is mainly going to be a demo based. There won't be any slides. I'm pleased to hear. But first I want to talk about really the purpose of Microsoft Teams. So the purpose, how I see it, how Microsoft sees it, is Teams is to boost productivity by improving the flow of information within a business, and that can be both internally and externally. And how does it do this? Microsoft Teams is a chat-based communication platform that brings together multiple different Microsoft and third-party technologies into a single interface to avoid the need to context switch. So to give you an example of what context switching means, if you don't use Microsoft Teams at the moment, if you're working on a Word document or an Excel sheet or a PowerPoint slide or a line of business application, you're going to be constantly moving backwards and forwards between these different applications using a number of different technologies. Microsoft Teams brings those together into a single interface to avoid the need to context switch. It's all based around the concept of chat and communication to sort of improve the collaboration in that. But what is a team? So my opinion, the way I try to advertise to customers is a team generally can be considered any group of people that work together to get something done. Now I like to focus on recommending that teams are created to focus either on the type of work that I or my colleagues are doing, or perhaps for projects that I'm working on, which means that every team does have and does serve a purpose. So for example, we have a number of teams within Ultima to administer projects that we're working on for clients. So projects is the perfect example for Teams. It brings together a group of users from around the business from lots of different departments into a single place to collaborate in a small, medium or large project. Another example could be the users from a single department within a business, for example, finance or operations. They could be brought together inside a team to then work together for a single goal. Or perhaps you could have a team that encompasses represents the entire organization. So that could be more of a town hall type scenario where you want to share information with the entire business. That's also possible within Microsoft Teams. The point is that each team that is created should serve a purpose. It's very easy in the early days to certainly start creating teams all over the place, and for it to get very, very, very big and content to sprawl out without any level of control. Certainly you have to always consider what is the purpose of those teams. And that's one of the big benefits of trying to have some control around how teams can sprawl out. So I'm first going to walk through the interface a little bit and then give you an example of some tips and tricks as we go forward. Now, this will work. So for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to be using the web-based client and not the client application. In the most part, the feature parity is the same between them both. There are a few shortcuts that you can't do in the web-based client that you can in the client application. Generally speaking, feature parity is the same. So I think I'm going to be demonstrating here today inside the web app should be possible in the client application as well. But yeah, for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to be using the web-based client here. And the first view, when you come in, when you're on the web-based client, it will always default to the activity view. If you're in the client application, it will default back to the last place you were when you closed it. But generally speaking, I always believe the activity is the first place that you would visit when you first open Microsoft Teams. The activity feed I consider very similar to your inbox in whichever mail client you currently use. So here's the place you'll first come first thing in the morning. And what appears in the feed is a collection of items that are for your attention. So I've got a few items in here, but if we were to pretend that there was a long list of items, it can get very, very busy, particularly if you're a member of lots of different teams. So I can see the ones that are bold are all unread, but I can also then apply a filter if I want to look at specific ones. So filtering can be done in one of two ways. We can click the filter button here. We can either type the filter, or we can choose from the ellipsis here which particular one we want to filter on. So if I look at the unread, there are 4. If I change it back and look at the items that are mentions, I'll discuss the mentions a bit more detail later on, but they are important to see if I wanted to filter based on that value, particularly if you have a long list of items. You can also filter from the command bar at the top. So if you press the / on the keyboard, you get a long list of different commands that the command bar will accept. For this particular example, if we do / unread, it will show me all the items that haven't been read by myself. And again, / mentions, if I spell it correctly, giving me anything that I have been mentioned. And that's the activity bar. Again, depending on the item that I select inside the navigation pane here, it will change the item that's in the main body of the interface here. So if I flick through, it will take me to where that particular item is in whichever channel and whichever team I'm a member of. So I can see here I was mentioned, there was a comment that was replied to. I was added to 2 or 3 teams here, and it's just giving me a notification of that event. Moving on to the chat part of Teams, and this is a very big part of Teams. I'm going to go through this quite quickly again due to time. The chat interface is one of the main parts where you'll spend most of your time in Teams, either here or in the Teams element, which I'm going to show in a second. But chat is quite big. And what we're seeing in the interface here is any existing chats I currently have open. And with the chat selected, I can then see the chat history on the right-hand side here. Chats can be either one-to-one or one-to-many. So what that means is it can be between myself and one other person, or myself and a number of people. And when there are one-to-one conversations, the conversation history is held within the Exchange mailbox of the particular user. So in this case, it's between Lee and Anne. That'll be held inside our mailboxes. As soon as the chat becomes a wider discussion with more than 2 people, it then gets moved into the group mailbox. That is a part of the Office 365 group that is sitting behind this particular team. It's worth knowing that just to understand where you might want to apply your attention if you want to keep hold of these items indefinitely, depending on where they are kept. So that's where the chats are held. And inside the chat interface, there are tabs as well, which allows us to do more with the particular chat. So the chat has conversation going backwards and forwards. I can see a particular file was shared back from Anne to Lee. I can look at the files tab here, and I can see any of the files that were shared backwards and forwards between us that are held in this particular view. And I can, on the organization tab, see the relationship between myself and the other person in the conversation. This depends on the manager field being populated within the user profile. My particular demo environment doesn't have an extensive list of users here, so for this purpose, I'm the boss, and is working underneath me, but there's no higher power in this particular example. Inside the chat, when you're typing messages and you're communicating, there are some additional items you can apply to the chat. So there is some formatting you can apply using the rich text functions in here. You can choose the marker for the message and how important it is. Important is used quite frequently, but I wouldn't recommend using urgent unless it is urgent, as it will annoy your colleagues, but it is a nice feature all the same. And there are additional features here. You can add attachments, you can put emojis. It's sort of quite common now with modern communication. You can attach GIFs. Everyone loves a good GIF. And you can schedule a meeting, and you can, depending on which other apps have been added, you can do other things depending on what those apps are. So I've got one here for praise, where you can, link to a stream video, or you can link in through the ellipsis, and any number of other apps you might want to include inside your chat. And that's inside the chat. This is very similar to the function that I'm going to show you in a second within the team, but this is the chat function here. If I want to bring in additional people, there is a button that's held just up here. Sorry, it's off the screen, so I can't show you. There's a little add button at the top. If I want to add this conversation was progressing to a wider audience, I want to bring someone else in, I can then add them in. This is worth showing here because I have my tenant set up to external access as well, so I'm allowing guests, and this is quite a good function to show in this. I appreciate it's quite confusing because both users have the same name, but the second user there is actually a guest user. It's my user account from Ultima, not within that tenant. So if this chat was to require Lee from Ultima to be brought in, I could include Lee there straight away. Lee would be added in and would be able to partake in that conversation the same way as if there was an internal user as well. So that's the chat. The next area is the Teams area, and similar with the chat, this is probably the area you're going to spend most of your time when you're working with the Teams interface. So what Teams will show here on the left inside this panel here is all of the teams that you are a member of. And what Teams does in the background is it will order them based on your level of interaction with these teams. So how frequent you comment or participate in certain conversations, or how often you upload items into those sites. It will order them based on that information. How long ago you were added, you can override this yourself. So if you decide I want to have this particular team at the top, I can click the name and drag it, move it to the very top. I can actually decide that the organization one is far too busy for me. I actually want to hide it, so I can click the ellipsis here and choose to hide. It doesn't disappear entirely, it moves it down into this hidden teams bucket down here. Now teams will drop into here naturally over a long period of time if you're a member of a large number of teams and your interaction with those teams is actually quite low. They will drop into here, they're not gone, and you can bring them back literally by going back into here and choosing to show them again, and it will then appear back in the interface. Within each team you have channels, and again I mentioned earlier about each team should have a purpose, and I believe each channel should have a purpose as well. And I like to think of the channel similar to the subject line in an email, so it's telling everyone what the information inside that email, or in this case channel, what is it about. And when you first create a team, you do get a general tab. I recommend not to use it, but many customers do like to use it, mainly because general doesn't really have much of an explanation of what it is. It hasn't really been classified, so I generally try to ignore it, and then I will create additional channels based on what the purposes are. Now, this team example here is for a type of project that we might be working on. So within Ultima, we work on projects on a number of different phases. So I've got a channel for each of the phases that are 3 examples of the phases that we'll use within a project. And within each of those channels, we then have a number of tabs, and then additional tabs we can create later on. So when you first create a channel, you'll by default get 3 tabs, and the tabs are just similar to iframes. They're going to enable you to render something into the client and will connect into a service of some kind. So for example, once you get out of the box when you first create a channel, we have the post, which is a conversation. So very similar to chat, but this is for the entire team. So the layout is slightly different. So I can see there's a conversation going between Lee and Anne has responded, and Lee's responded. So there's a conversation thread going there. I can start a new conversation thread here, and it will start a fresh conversation thread that's completely unique to the one before. Others can respond into that. They can then use the rich text interface, similar as you could within the chat interface, but it's the few additional features here, such as choosing whether people can reply, whenever you want to post that message into multiple different channels within multiple teams, and there's a few extra features you can add in here to make it more relevant to that particular item. But the chat function generally functions in the same way. Again, you can use extensions at the bottom to add additional flavor to the message you're putting as well from the interface here. One final thing I wanted to show you was with a tab, if you want to add a tab to a channel, you'll need to use the third party or a Microsoft approved app. This can be controlled at your tenant level, whether you allow them or whether you don't. And it sorts the ones at the top to sort of the most popular. And here is where the tabs will then render a particular item or a particular area of content into that team. So if I wanted to add in a Word app, it would allow me to choose a particular item within the site. So I have an expense policy here. If I save it, what it's going to do is it's going to create a tab with that file embedded in it, and then anyone that comes into the team that's working within the team, they can see the item without going to trawl through the team to try and find it. They can actually then go to the team, go to the channel, and find the item already embedded in it. If I then started a conversation on this particular item and started typing messages, what actually happened is it would start a conversation on the, wait a second. It actually started a conversation on the main post thread that's here. The benefit of that is while you're working inside that file, You could be co-authoring with your colleagues. Others could see that you're working on it. They can then chime in and comment if they wanted to as well. And they can actually click on the item as well and then come through into the same file and work on it together with you. So I appreciate that's quite a whistle-stop tour of the interface within the time permitted. Does anyone have any questions on the interface before I hand over to Tom, please? You should have the ability to type questions if you want to. So if anyone has any questions, please post them. Okay. If you do have any questions as we go through, if you post them in, we can try and answer them at the end, or we can answer them after the meeting if need be. But I'll now hand over to Tom, who will then take you through the Microsoft Surface devices.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Lee. It's always fantastic, even working at Microsoft, and I'm always in Teams every day, is getting little tips and tricks as to how to use it better, because I know a lot of my teams a lot of them are unread, it seems, some of the ones that are lesser used, and to be able to go on there and filter, I always forget to use that function. So yeah, thank you for bringing that to light to me again. I just want to double check that you can all see my screen okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off just by talking a little bit about Microsoft Teams and the modern workplace, and our view on that from a Microsoft standpoint. And then I'm going to go into the Surface devices. So I'm Tom Cripps, as Lee said and introduced me. I'm a partner development manager, and I sit within the Surface team. However, a lot of what we do in terms of sales, we don't think of a device sale, or we don't think about solutions as separate things. We look at how we bring those two things together to basically highlight the best expression of Microsoft 365 or Microsoft's technology on a particular device. But before I kind of jump into that, what I wanted to do is to go through with you like what Microsoft sees as what we call the modern workplace. And so the modern workplace is, we don't think about it as a physical place, but we actually think about it as a way of working. And as you all know, the way that we work and the way that we collaborate and the way that we do things nowadays is different from 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, let alone from 20 years ago. But whilst we're going through this change and this different way of working, we need to think about what's best for the user in order to get the most in terms of productivity and to drive the best results. And in order to do that, individuals are going to need to have access to all of their files and their data and everything that they need to do their work efficiently. They need to work from anywhere. So gone are the days where you wake up, you have your breakfast at home, you go into the office, and then you get to your desk, and that is when your day commences, and your day finishes when you log off. Actually, nowadays, I think a lot of you would probably agree that you wake up and people, whilst they're eating their breakfast, they'll have their mobile phone open with their applications on it, and they can start going through their email and clearing off some of the stuff. You might be sat on a bus or a train and continuing to work there. And if you're not doing that, obviously that's not a problem. Some places you don't work like that. However, in terms of productivity and the way that people want to work, I think it's being able to give people the ability to do that is important nowadays. Collaboration, as we're talking about here in terms of teams, and working with your team is important as well, and being able to do that freely. And I'm not going to draw on the situation that we're in at the moment, and everyone's sick to death of it. However, it's prevalent, it's real, and companies need to think about, how do we ensure, if anything like this was to happen again, how can we ensure that that collaboration continues to work? And obviously, all around this, as a wraparound, being safe and secure is important throughout. And so I wanted just to pop this on here, which is a few stats around kind of teamwork trends. So diversity in the workplace is ever greater. We've got up to 5 generations of people working together. Some of those people might prefer to communicate via telephone, some via IM, some might prefer email. How do we kind of pull all of these things together and make a singular pane of glass where people can go to collaborate and work? 80% of employees' time is spent collaborating. Obviously, we're more powerful and we're more productive when we get together in groups and we work as teams. And so when we get separated from our teams, how do we continue to make sure that that productivity remains the same? And then the other point here is that 72% of workers will be working remotely by 2020. Now, we need to adapt to change in order to make sure that those individuals can do their work as effectively as possible throughout that change as they move into this new environment. And there's a few more things here about the transforming workplace in terms of transforming collaboration. It's imperative for businesses. So 86% of leaders are citing that, cite that there's a lack of collaboration and ineffective communication within their organizations. Now, obviously, that's an issue and something that we can address via technology. 65% of leaders agree that moving from hierarchical based into teams based is more critical for their success. As a side note, I was just thinking as I was going through the text when I was reading a book recently around the leadership tactics of the SAS, and one of the things they talk around is removing hierarchy and giving everyone the ability to have their equal say and input regardless of where they sit within that overall team, under leadership obviously. And so it's kind of interesting to see that, you know, everyone's got an opinion, and it's important to get a good view across all of those opinions in order to drive the change that you need to be successful nowadays. And then the final point there is that 45% of leaders are implementing web-based collaboration solutions at scale in their companies. I think this will be a lot higher now, given the scenario we're in. And actually, Microsoft was citing within the first few weeks of the lockdown that Teams usage was up 700%. You'll see things, you know, other applications and these unified comms applications going through the roof at the moment. And so we want to make sure that you're doing that safely, securely within your current environment and making sure that you're getting the most out of all the technology that you're using. So Lee's done an excellent job at going through what Teams is, so I'm not going to kind of focus on this point, so to say, and again, it was a fantastic demo. But ultimately, Teams is an application that sits within, or it's a service that sits within Office 365. It's an application that can be either web-based or desktop-based. And it's basically a single unified communication platform. The kind of key things that we pull out here are the 4 main points, which are around the ability to use chat, the ability to host and run meetings, the ability to do calling or teleconferencing or PSTN, or, should you need to, and then file exchange. Obviously, the back end is driven by SharePoint, essentially, for Teams. And one of the things that I wanted to pull out on that is business calling reinvented. So thinking about if you've got you know, a calling communication strategy or plan, or you're looking at implementing one, Teams is able to handle that as well. And so moving away from this kind of tied to the desktop, you know, phone-based kind of thing to having a device where you can have your teleconferencing on the go all the time. Moving away from having multiple applications for these different services and moving into one single unified communication strategy. Moving away from on-premise PBX, moving more to this cloud-based telephony system. Again, being able to work from anywhere. And then obviously the multi-vendor complexity, how do you remove that complexity and boil that down all into one single simple provider, which Microsoft do all too well. I'm going to kind of flip through some of this because I'm just a bit conscious of time and I want to get onto the devices piece. But we can see here that Teams is growing, again, 700% year over year on Teams in usage at the moment. 91 of 100 of the Fortune 100 companies are using Teams, supported in 55 languages, so obviously it's worldwide. We've now got over 500,000 organizations that are actively using Teams and more than 44 million active daily users. And so this leads me on to the Surface device, because we say that the Surface device brings out, it's the best expression of Microsoft 365 is on a Surface device. And so what a lot of people don't know is that we've been in business now for 7 years on Surface. So it's still relatively young compared to some of the other OEMs that we work with and what we partner with. The idea is that the Surface brand came to light because what we wanted to do is we wanted to innovate faster than some of our other partners were currently innovating. We wanted to make sure that the experience that customers are getting on the device is the best in class. And that's when we come up with Surface. And we've now got all of these devices, from the Pro, the Book, the Studio, the Hub, the Go. That's our range. And essentially what we have is we have a device that fits the needs of everyone and every individual within an organization. And so this is the kind of the journey that we've been on. I just wanted to kind of highlight this, that you'll see that there's iteration after iteration of these different devices. You'll see that with a number that falls after each of the ones. So you know that we're committed to this business and to driving it. This year we had well, we continue to grow every year. We're building on performance and on sales, and more organizations are understanding the strategies of what Microsoft are trying to do. And as I was saying before, in terms of what we've got from a device perspective on the different roles that are available, we wanted to have something that fits the needs of every customer, but not just customer, because there's obviously different roles that sit within each of those different customers. It's not just a case that it's one size fits all, because it depends on what the role is and what that individual's doing. So you can see here we've kind of got like a left to right across some different roles that are played within different organizations, and then we've overlaid where we think that each of these devices kind of fits on this spectrum. So I'll start on the far left to talk about the Surface Go 2. So the Surface Go 2 went to GA about 2 weeks ago now. Obviously, it's the second iteration of our Surface Go product, which is a 10-inch tablet device, which Microsoft brought to market because there was other well-known 10-inch tablet devices which were being sold at scale into commercial organizations, and obviously running a different operating system. Now, customers were calling out for something similar that ran Windows OS and had the same experience and had the same, feel and use as those other devices. So we came up with this device, which is also available in LTE, so to remain connected anywhere, which again is important if we want to get the most out of our work and drive the best performance in employees. Giving them the connectivity to the internet from wherever they are, and not having those issues where you kind of turn up to an office where the Wi-Fi is wired, or the internet's wired, or where the Wi-Fi is not so good, or you're on a train and you're struggling, those kind of things. So for things like roaming customer service agents, for field service workers, in education, we see these devices are very well utilized because of the size, the cost of them, but also like the portability and the usage. As we move along this spectrum, we've then got the Surface Pro X, which is our latest LTE device, apart from the Surface Go 2, which came out a couple of weeks ago, as I say, which again is a best-in-class experience, supportive of USB-C. It's the thinnest and lightest Surface device that we've ever created, and it's always connected with LTE. Now we think about that plays into those field service roles, the mobile service representatives, customer relationship managers, so those that are out and about, they're in the field, they want the portability, they need the connectivity. Surface Pro is our flagship device, what we initially started with, and the whole idea of the Surface family is it focused around that two-in-one capability, so having the portability to be able to go and do this kind of work that we're talking about, which isn't office-based necessarily, but then when you are office-based, to have that same power and functionality and access to all of your applications and your key data that you need on the go. We then had the Surface Laptop 3 came out because a lot of people, and people still aren't familiar with this device, but we've got a laptop device which comes in 13 and 15-inch variants, and now a lot of people are used to that traditional clamshell laptop experience, and so that's what they wanted to continue to invest in, and they didn't want to change. So we've decided to bring out a laptop which does the same as which is similar to that in terms of a form factor, but then also has all of the great features and functionality when it comes to touch input, when it comes to using the pen, when it comes to voice capability, and obviously running the Windows OS as well. I'm sorry, conscious that I'm running on this slide quite a long time, but we then look across to the right, and we've got this more kind of executive approach, or like front of desk solution, which is around like the Surface Studio 2, which is actually what I'm using here today. And so this device is the best in terms of when we're thinking about design. If we want to use design applications, the power of the device is there. We're able to move it down into the studio mode so that we can actively draw and write on the device. And obviously you can see that this would work really well as a front of house solution. And obviously executives like this have it on their desk at home or in the office, because it's a 27-inch device and it's just beautiful and it's standout. And then the final device just that I want to talk about there is the Surface Book 3, which I've got one in front of me here. Now, the Surface Book 3 is our ultimate powerhouse performance device. So when we come to thinking about people like data analysts or architects or any of these kind of roles, or engineers, or people that need to run heavy applications like CAD, for example, then Surface Book would be perfect, and that's what we do. So you can see there that we've got a device that fits various different roles depending on the use, from light use all the way up to executive and to kind of power users on a device anyway. And the reason that I wanted to kind of draw on those different roles and why people do that is because when we think about teams and how that fits together with this, it's important to understand that teams will be used differently depending on the team that you're in. Now, it might come down to being, sales and updating your sales pipeline, or any of your Excel documents that relate to that, and that you need to upload and share them with your team or with your manager ready for your forecast call. It might be that you sit in marketing and you need to upload a customer pitch in order to share that with your team so that you can actively go in, collaborate, and show that together. It might be that you work in finance or HR, or actually it doesn't matter where you work. There's all these different scenarios that are kind of outlaid here, but there's going to be a different usage depending on what you do. And that's the same for the device. But then when you pull those two things together, we can actively work across all of these different parts of the organization, but collaboratively, and still drive the same outcomes as what we're trying to ultimately do. And whilst it might slightly differ, there's still similarity, which is important. And I just wanted to kind of pick up on the Surface piece as to why Surface is so special. So, a lot of people often ask us, like, what's the silver bullet? So why Surface versus anything else? And I think what we need to think about here is that when we give employees a best-in-class device, something that they're proud to use, to take out of their bag, that they want to get out on the train to show off, that they like that you give it to them, they feel empowered, so they're going to want to work. They feel valued by their organization. And we can start to think about some different things around, when we're talking to HR around how are we going to maintain acquisition or retention of the talent that we hire into the organization. How are we going to, once we've got people into the organization, how are we going to retain them in there? Because people want to leverage technology to their advantage nowadays, and more we see that people coming out of university and they're asking, what does the technology look like within the organization? Because in order to achieve the best that I can, I need the tools in order to do that. So it might be an investment that we want to make, but it does have an ROI based around it, because we're seeing increased performance, increased engagement, increased talent acquisition, increased retention, and all of these things kind of built together, they just work. We draw on some different points. I've already touched on it, but in terms of the devices being thin, light, and versatile by design, that's just something that's inherent with the Surface brand. I don't want to labor too much on these points. In terms of the way that we interact with the device, now this is important and it can be overlooked, but when we're talking about things like screen resolution, when we're talking about things like audio quality, when it comes to using that device hand in hand with something like Teams, it's really important that you are getting the best. We often talk around removing the kind of technology aspect, and it should be that you feel as though that you're interacting with someone as though they're there. Now, if we do this right, and if we have the right technology, and we have the good resolution cameras, and we have the microphones that people can hear as well with clarity and clearly, then that makes the experience that much better, and that makes it even easier to kind of get on and do what we're ultimately looking to do. When it comes to performance, performance is obviously key. I mean, how often has something gone wrong with your computer, and the thing that you end up shouting at or being frustrating at with is your PC itself? Now, it might not be the PC, it might be the applications that's running on that PC, but we always blame the endpoint, which is that device itself. So in terms of getting the most out of it with Surface and with Microsoft, the battery life will get you to where you need to be. We have all-day battery life across the majority of our devices. We have fast charge on the devices, so you can go from 0 to 100% in an hour on fast charge on the new devices. We've got the performance, so we've got the best in class. We've got the Intel and 10th gen processors across the range. And when you start to add all of these things together, the productivity aspect and the work that you're getting out of yourself becomes heightened, and that's ultimately what all of us want to do. We want to achieve more and to give our best. And obviously, from Microsoft, security is absolutely paramount. And obviously, we build these devices, we've created these devices by design, and we often talk about security from silicon to the cloud, so all the way from the chipset upwards. And there's a number of features that are unique to Surface which showcase how this device is more secure versus some of our competition, which obviously, given the remote working and the circumstances that we were looking to work in across these platforms and the way that we're talking here, is it's imperative and it's extremely important. And so, just to kind of summarize on all of this, I started with it at the beginning, but it's just to say that obviously the workplace is changing. We've got more data and information which is being used to drive important business critical decisions than ever. And we need to understand how we can get that information and how we can use that information to the best of our advantage as an organization. We've got fewer cubicles and silos, so there's more collaborative workspaces. People are working together more often, but often from different places. So how do we remove those barriers? How do we make sure that we can shown to be there when we're not there? There's higher expectations. Obviously, a business is focused around the ideas, and the ideas come from the employees. And so how do we get those ideas from the employees? How do we enable them to share those ideas with us and across the team in order to build on those and to differentiate essentially, and to show something that you're doing differently from other organizations? And there's obviously more pressure to deliver results faster. So how can we make sure that we're not, by doing all of this and taking this kind of segmented approach, how can we make sure that the speed is still there and that we're still working together? And then for the final point there, just clicked off my presentation. Oh no, what have I done? Oh, wait to fail at the last hurdle. Sorry, I've managed to click off my presentation and I've missed out on my final point. But guys, I'm going to summarize by saying we feel that by bringing together Teams and Surface devices, these two things together are best in class and will ultimately enable the best across collaboration, security, working together, and empowering our teams ultimately to do more. So I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to hand over to Mark Davis from Lenovo, who's going to talk about the solution that they've got to support with all of this ideology that we're talking about. So thank you very much. Cheers, Mark.
Thank you, Tom. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm going to get up my presentation. So thank you, Tom and Lee. Really good segue into Lenovo and what we're doing in this space at the moment. So yeah, my name is Mark Davis. I'm the Smart Office Channel Manager for Lenovo, UK and Ireland. And over the last 2 years, we as Lenovo have been developing Microsoft Teams Rooms devices for meeting rooms to tie in the application that Lee was running through in terms of Teams into the meeting room. And a really timely device from our perspective, which I'm going to talk to you about in the main today, is our ThinkSmart View device, which really ties in well with what Lee was talking about around individual users, about the business calling element of Teams as well, which I think is really important. And before I do that, I just wanted to give you a bit of background in terms of some of the stats that we see. And again, Tom sort of touched on some of those, but I've got some latest figures hot off the press, Tom, in terms of usage for Teams, and it is absolutely staggering. So 75 million active daily users globally, so doubled in the last 4 weeks. Tom's already mentioned about the Fortune 100 companies. I think what's interesting here is we're seeing more and more customers, 650 customers with over 10,000 users in an organization. And meeting minutes have grown from 500 million per day to 4.1 billion per day by the end of April. So quite clearly, the market is very, very buoyant. And of course, it's not great given the fact that COVID-19 and the horrific things that have been happening, and that is of course drastically drastically increased the working environment for working from home, working remotely, and not being able to get into an office, which is obviously why we've seen this huge growth over the last sort of 4 to 8 weeks. Now, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, has actually said that Microsoft have seen customers transform their digital transformation in 2 months rather than 2 years. So that just shows how much this has really sped up the way that our customers look at communication, they look at collaboration, how do they connect to their workforce who may well be at home, and then back to the key workers in an office environment who will need to be in an office. So although I'm going to talk principally today about the ThinkSmart View, I just wanted to give you a very quick slide on some of the other devices that we've got in this particular space. So if you think about the ThinkSmart View device that I'm about to show you as more of a kind of a personal device or for smaller meeting rooms, that fits really well. The phone booth is a term that we use quite a lot. Our Hub 500, which has been our flagship product for about 2 years now, we've sold many thousands of these into small, medium, and even into sort of large-scale meeting rooms. In fact, Microsoft themselves have bought 3,000 of these devices globally for their meeting rooms. And then on the right-hand side, although it shows as a Zoom device, we also have a Microsoft edition of our tiny PC, and that's what we call a modular solution. So if you've got a meeting room where you want to be able to piece together different technologies and you need a computer in that room to run Microsoft Teams, then we have a device called the tiny PC to be able to do that. Right, without further ado, let me get on to the ThinkSmart View. So this for me is a really exciting device. It's very unique in the market. Yes, there are people in the market who will do IP phones. Yes, there are people in the market who will have some form of video device, but what they haven't got is the two combined. And effectively, it is a small tablet device. In fact, I don't know whether you can see my video. I've got one here in terms of the footprint of the device. And this basically allows me to join Microsoft Teams video calls first and foremost, because it's a video device, but also it allows me to make and receive Microsoft Teams telephony calls. And because it's standalone, it means that it can work in different environments. Some of the stats or the tech specs on the device itself, so it's an 8-inch touch display. It has a built-in 720p wide-angle camera, so the video quality is really good. Built-in audio, so you don't have to have a separate speaker system. You have that all built in to the device itself. You've also got a privacy shutter, so if you wanted to turn off your video, you can also, of course, do that. And of course, you control your volume directly from the device as well. It is certified by Microsoft, and as I say, very unique, and even more unique when you look at the actual cost of the device when compared with a traditional IP phone. It's very competitive indeed. Now, some of the other things that you can do with the device is you can actually pair it with a Bluetooth headset, and I'm going to show you one of our headsets that we're going to be launching at the same time with this device. But if you've got a Bluetooth headset from the likes of Jabra or Poly or Sennheiser or anybody else, as long as it's a Bluetooth headset, it will absolutely work with our device as well. No problem whatsoever. You can also pair the device with your PC. So if, for example, you are in a security conscious, you want to lock your PC, you want to walk away from your desk, if you lock your PC, it will also lock the device as well. So the way that we actually position this device is a device that aids what your PC is doing. I mean, I join and have been joining for the last God knows how many years on Teams, the last couple of years on Teams from my PC. However, since I've had my ThinkSmart View device, I've actually seen that I can use that device for my video meetings and my audio meetings, and then it frees up my PC to allow me to collaborate and to work on other documents. It frees up my PC as a resource. Later on down the line, you'll be able to actually use the ThinkSmart View device once the latest update is released to actually physically pull down content from Teams. So if you've got some files in your Teams folder, you'll be able to bring that down using the ThinkSmart View and then present that into a meeting, which I think is going to work really nicely as well. Some other features of the device that's worth mentioning: it is a wireless only device. You do not need to have any Ethernet ports or network connectivity. As long as you've got a strong wireless connectivity, you simply connect your device to it as you would an iPhone or an Android phone device. Once you're on your wireless network, the next thing you do is just simply input your Office 365 credentials, and then it is your device to use. It will bring down your calendar. You've got one button to push to join meeting rooms. You'll be able to see and view your voicemails. You can see your recent lists. You can, of course, make phone calls from the device as well. And at that point, it's just a very, very simple device to use. You don't have to really be trained on how to use it. It's very intuitive, and that's the whole point of the device itself. It is always connected, which is great. There is an AC power adapter that comes with the device. So in the box, it's a power adapter. It's a ThinkSmart View. Really, really simple to get up and running. And then in terms of security, you can add in there a 4-digit PIN to the device, so you make sure that it's actually locked, and only obviously you know that, similar to what you would have on your mobile device. And then, as I said, you've got the privacy shutters and the mute switch straight from the device as well. And the device is monitored directly from the Microsoft Teams admin portal. So for any IT managers on the call, it's very, very simple and very easy to manage these devices as they're deployed across your employees. So what are the core features at the moment? So it's calls, meetings, voicemails. As I've already alluded to, it's the ability to lock and unlock the view with your PC, to add a Bluetooth headset. You can also put the device into hot desking in a shared mode, so it becomes a meeting room device, and I'll show you briefly some scenarios in a minute. And then, of course, it's got all of the IP phone functionality that you would expect from any good IP phone. So call queuing, group call pickup, parky, and everything else. Voicemails, I've already mentioned. For all intents and purposes, it is your IP phone. So here's where we see this device working nicely. Now, home use is obviously an obvious one. I mean, we've certainly seen over the last 2 months of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic that a lot of our customers were not ready to shift all of their office users to a home working environment. There was a big scramble to get hold of PCs and notebooks and other devices so those users and those workers could actually join meetings. Well, the ThinkSmart View is a perfect cost-effective device to allow our customers to be able to quickly do that. So the home use is obvious. Where else we would see this working really well is in the phone booth scenario. So I don't, the term the new normal, I know it's overused, but what does that look like in the next sort of 6 months for businesses as we get back into the office? Is it actually going to be that we're going to have single-use meeting rooms rather than larger rooms where it's more difficult to social distance? At which point this ThinkSmart View becomes a very valid device in that scenario. Other scenarios are where perhaps you're in small teams, and I'm thinking sort of 2 or 3 people. You can see that sort of open office desk environment in number 2, and the same in number 3 in the huddle room as well. Does a customer really need to invest 2, 3, 4, 5,000 pounds into a meeting room device, a traditional meeting room device, when actually the ThinkSmart View would probably fit quite neatly into that type of scenario? Now, it is a video first device, but I really, really want to get into the conversation here around the IP telephony. Let's face it, IP phones are old hat. They're usually quite clunky, they're expensive. They don't really have, well, very rarely do they have video built in, unless you're looking at some of the high-end Cisco endpoints. And we believe that we've come out with a very unique proposition to enable our customers to not only think about video, but where are you going in your voice journey. Tom alluded to this before. Historically, traditional PBXs are expensive to maintain. The licensing costs are expensive, so it's not easy to scale up and down. And yeah, it can be quite a heavy investment to have to put in. But as you transition to the cloud, it allows you to obviously scale up or scale down with your users as and when. It allows you to easily add devices, and all of the support and everything else is wrapped up within that monthly fee or that annual fee that you might well be paying for your licensing. So in actual fact, it becomes much easier to add a device into that environment of yours. Finally, I mentioned the ThinkPad X1 headset. So this is our headset that we're going to be bundling with our ThinkSmart View device. But as I said, if you already have an existing Bluetooth device, then you're absolutely good to go there. Just conscious of time, I think that was pretty much it from me. One thing to finish on moving forward from a roadmap perspective is we've got our ThinkSmart View, we've got our Hub 500, we've got our Tiny. We're also going to be developing towards the end of the summer a ThinkSmart Core meeting room device, which will be made up of our own dedicated touch panel. It will have our own dedicated compute, and we're also going to be releasing a 4K camera, which will have intelligent proximity, speaker tracking. It's going to work and be certified by Microsoft themselves for things like content sharing and whiteboarding within the Teams application itself. And then we're also going to have a very, very high-end soundbar that will be perfect for meeting rooms who are looking to have high-end, really good audio in the meeting room as well. So that's it for me. Unless there are any questions in the chat box, let me just see if there are. I don't think there is. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Really, really appreciate your time, and yeah, have a good day. Thanks very much.